All right, everyone, welcome back to Newcastle Fans TV. It's a wonderful evening, finally replacing Steve Bruce. Eddie Howe being linked heavily in the papers, Sky Sports News and BBC both reporting that he is a shoo-in for the job now, yet to be officially confirmed by the club. I'm obviously joined here by Lee and Carl. Good evening, lads. How are we doing?
Not bad. News keeps developing. What a week.
I know. It just doesn't stop since the takeover. It just keeps rolling and rolling and rolling, doesn't it? Well, we'll start off with initial impressions of the appointment. Then, obviously, moved quite quickly the other day with Unai Emery. You know, everyone was reporting it left, right, and centre. Everyone was getting ahead of themselves. You know, Europa League winning fiend. He knows what he's doing. You know, he had a bit of bad luck with Arsenal, but he's a really good manager. And everyone got very, very excited, very ahead of themselves. And it fell through right at the last. And then Eddie Howe in himself, he's a proven Premier League manager at the moment. Carl, what's your first impressions if this is to be confirmed by the club? What do you make of it?
Yeah, I'm absolutely happy. I think for myself anyway, when Steve Bruce was in charge, Eddie Howe was one of my top picks for him to replace him. Obviously, there is a little bit of I'm not deflated. I think, like I said yesterday, we've kind of been brought back down to earth a little bit because we were had these carrots dangled in front of us with Unai Emery and Fonseca. But no, I'm more than happy. And I think he's more than capable of doing the job at hand. And you know, there was talks of there not being an interim manager, and I think Eddie Howe will be that. But I think he's one of the probably the perfect appointment to start the transition off.
Yeah, you mentioned there, Carl, the downgrades from, you know, Unai Emery and even we were linked with Antonio Conte at one point, who's obviously gone to Spurs since. Lee, I don't see this as a downgrade from those managers because he's still got that quality about him, hasn't he? It's still a good appointment by the club and it is ambitious at the end of the day.
Yeah, I said on the overlap, I'll take Eddie out. So for me, if you rewind 3 weeks ago, we had Steve Bruce in charge and we had Mike Ashley. Fast forward 3 weeks, we've now got rid of Ashley and we could potentially have Eddie Howe, who was well respected. People are always going to say in his last job and his last season that he got relegated and finished 18th position. And literally came down the last game of the season or the penultimate game. But look what he's done at Bournemouth. He's took them from literally going bust in League Two, bottom of League Two, by the way, get them all the way up the divisions, all the way climbing into the Premier League. And not just the Premier League, he kept them there for 5 years. And Bournemouth, and no disrespect, are tiny compared to other Premier League clubs. And he's done a hell of a job. And people might, and I know you'll probably come on to the transfers and stuff, Matt, but the profit that he's got for Bournemouth, he has spent big, but the profit on some of those players, I mean, selling Tyrone Mings for how much was that? 24 million?
Yeah, big profit.
And obviously we've got 3 of their players as well.
Yeah. I was actually living in Bournemouth at the time, throughout the majority of this from 2012 onwards. So literally seeing the change in the city for their football on a weekend was unbelievable. Because when I first moved down there, like Lee said, Bournemouth were nothing at the end of the day. And people are really quick to throw out the fact that it was relegated from the Premier League. But honestly, being down there, what he actually did for that city was unbelievable. Unbelievable.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that, Carl. Like, literally, as we were preparing to come on and do this video, I was just scrolling through Twitter and there was a video of Eddie Howe from Sky Sports. I think it was about a year ago or something. And he's talking about how does he measure his success as a manager. You know, obviously he was saying results on the pitch, blah, blah, blah. But then he mentioned the fans, the city of the places I think he was a pundit for a Liverpool game. And he said, you know, look at a city like Liverpool. It's much more than just football. And when he goes into a club, he doesn't go into it lightly. You know, he's got to take that pressure of the fans of the city on his back and he's got to give back to them. And like you say, he's done that with Bournemouth, taking them from the very depths of the Football League or the professional Football League up to where they are today. And, you know, he laid the foundations for what is now arguably a Championship Premier League yo-yo club, you know, rather than just League Two fodder to be floating around the lower divisions. And that's all down to him and his tactics, his investment in the club and his passion. We'll just quickly read through the reports from Sky Sports. I'll quickly share my screen so you can read along with me as well. But this is what what's largely reported. Eddie Howe agreed a deal in principle to become the Newcastle manager. It's a 2.5 year deal, Lee. I think that's probably what we could have expected for any manager because, anything shorter than that's probably a bit too short-sighted. Anything longer, we don't want to get ahead of ourselves. What do you make of that from the new owners offering that kind of mid-level contract to him?
I think it's about right, because if you give him a big, massive 5-year deal and it all goes tits up, I think we'll all be a bit worried that there's another big payoff. I know that we're talking about Bruce might have like 8 million payoff and so on, but they're just rumours and figures. I think it makes sense because it might be good for him as well. I think what's important is try not to worry too much further down the line. Worry about now. Let's focus on now. Let's try what the short term is. What we're in early November. We've got a lot of games, especially December. So if Newcastle get on a run of form, I know we've got some tough fixtures, and it's so early in the season. I know we're 6 points adrift. But if Eddie Howe was to come in and we had a good run, and this is going to sound a bit mad, but we could be sitting in mid-table come January because there's that many games. There's a game every 3 days. Or you can flip it on the other side, whereas Newcastle could be even cut more adrift. Depends which way you look at it. I think it's a sensible appointment, 2.5-year deal, if that does, fingers crossed. I think it's sensible because if he wants to break away or doesn't go Newcastle's way, the figures to get rid of him isn't going to be large.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's sensible is the key word there for me. They're not getting putting millions and millions of pounds into a manager like someone like Conte, who, yes, is obviously a fantastic coach, but maybe isn't the right fit. It's a sensible appointment for the now that hopefully, like you say, is going to pay off and have some pretty quick turnaround in results and get us up that table. The sooner the better. So the statement goes on in the report, 2.5-year contract. Held additional talks with the club this week regarding the vacant role. Positives in the finer details of the discussions. The backroom staff seems to be a big part of this deal, with Howe intending to what it looks like anyway, Carl, to bring in some of his own backroom staff, which I think is desperately needed at the club, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. I think we do need a complete overhaul. There's, I don't solely blame Steve Bruce, but there are the remnants of what was left when he left. I'm still not convinced on the Graham Jones staying. I appreciate that he's a decent coach, but me personally, I know he's worked with Eddie Howe, so I'd rather just cut him adrift. But yeah, I think we definitely need a complete overhaul, and Eddie Howe bringing in his ex-backroom staff is a no-brainer.
Yeah, it's the report going on to say as well that attention will be turning to sort the agreements. They were impressed by his level of detail and research on the club. So it seems that he himself is keen on the job. He's very passionate. He wants to come in and change things for the better. He's not just coming in for a quick buck or to get his name back in the hat of Premier League management. He seems to genuinely care about the project, and he seems to know the players and the club from his research as well, which I don't doubt. He strikes me as the kind of person that would be very, very precise with his research.
Sorry, Matt.
All right.
There's a few of those videos you talked about them a little bit earlier. There's one where he's doing the tactics. I think that's on YouTube. Yeah, the coach's one. There's one where he's got the microphone clipped in as well. That's the Bournemouth one. There's the Monday Night Football. I've seen on an interview where he comes in when he was the manager at Bournemouth. He comes in at 6:30 in the morning. 6:30 in the morning, and does a 12-hour stint. Kind of that reminded me of a bit like Rafa. Rafa would just spend the whole day, regardless if the players were in for 2 or 3 hours, he'll be there the full whack from top to bottom, having his say on from sports physio to what they eat to the players, even the cleaners, saying hello to them. Top to bottom, Eddie Howe was a workaholic, so you won't just come in. And I know I was live at Brandon earlier, and there was a couple of comments saying he was too homesick when he went to Burnley. But remember, he's still only 43. He's really young. And when he went to Burnley, what was he, 36, 37? No, I think he might be a little bit younger. So it is a way up north, but I think it's a positive. If it happens tomorrow, and I'm saying if, it's a positive one, we've got to back him. So we kind of think, we're being taken over. Well, let's go after Hollywood. This is a sensible, right appointment for me. I think it's where we are at the moment. We've got to break up that ladder and try and get up that league. We can worry about Champions League, Europa League, and dream later on. That's if the investment allows that. But right now, we've got to get out the shitter. We've got to get out of the table.
got to be realistic, haven't we? And it's down to the fans, it's down to us to get behind him as well when he comes in. We might not see instant results. At the end of the day, the quality of the squad isn't fantastic. As good as he is as a manager, he may come in and there may be a bit of a stuttering start, but we've still got to back him. We've got to give him January to bring in some players that he wants to bring in. We presume that he will be given financial backing, and like you said earlier, we'll get onto that. His investments in the past, some that have worked, some that have backfired. But yeah, we've got to, as fans, we've got to get behind him, because he will. There is the potential that he might be homesick. He might not fit in straight away. It might not gel. We've got to give him that time to work with the squad. We can't expect instant results. Obviously, it would be fantastic if we did get instant results. But yeah, so he's expected to come in, presuming that he's going to be announced tomorrow, if he is announced. So it's highly unlikely that he'll be in charge for the weekend's game at Brighton. So it looks like Graham Jones will be in charge for that. I think he's facing the media tomorrow. So I think he'll probably give us a bit more detail on what the owners have said to him. Graham Jones, obviously, what the owners have said to him, if he's going to be in charge any further. But yeah, Eddie Howe coming in, hopefully announced tomorrow. Won't be in charge for the weekend's game, but will be in charge after that. I wanted to bring Eddie Howe's managerial record into this. We know he's been a bit of a one-club man with Bournemouth, played most of his career there, retired, became the manager there. And there was one particular season that struck me, which was his first season in charge. So it was the 2008-09 season. He only had 23 games in charge, which is about half a season in League Two. And he took an average of 1.7 points, which I know doesn't sound fantastic, but 23 games played, 12 wins, 3 draws, 8 losses. And, the team were already struggling when he took over at that point. For me, I'm concentrating on that because it's a similar kind of season that he'll be coming in halfway through. He won't necessarily know the players inside out as a manager. He's going to be coming in with a struggling team and trying to get the points on the board. 23 games, 12 wins. That'll be a decent turnover for us if he was to get that in the Premier League. Carl, are you expecting an instant impact from Eddie Howe, or are you going to judge him after January when he's brought some recruitment in?
I'll be honest, mate. He's got till the end of the season for me to judge him. To be completely honest, I think the majority of us should be backing him in that sense. But I think he'll have an immediate impact anyway, certainly on the likes of Matt Ritchie. I think Matt Ritchie will have lost his way a little bit and become kind of disenfranchised with the club, and I think he's going to have an immediate benefit for him. Callum Wilson, obviously. Now, I know he had a fallout with Ryan Fraser, but I'm sure that they'll be professional enough to let that, bygones be bygones. So there's 3 players he'll have a positive impact on for me straight away, and I think that will just resonate throughout the dressing room with time. So I genuinely think it's one of those things where you get a new manager, and if it being the right person, we could literally just win on Saturday just because Eddie Howe's in the stands, for example. Nothing other than that. And I kind of feel like that's where we might be at the weekend. I think we'll have an immediate positive impact from him.
Yeah, we've already seen, like, in the stands from the takeover, the fans much more vocal and supportive, and it's given the team that lift that we've been missing. And, that's without a permanent manager in charge. So it'll be amazing to see the difference once the manager is in charge. The fixtures, obviously, we mentioned we've got Brighton at the weekend, which he won't be in charge for. But then after that, you've got to look at the next few fixtures and say, they're ones we've got to be taking points from. Arsenal away will be a very tricky one. But after that, we've got Norwich and Burnley at home, both right down at the bottom end of the table, Lee. Realistically, must win. We've got to be 6 points from those 2 games, hasn't it?
Yeah, you can afford to get beat off the teams who are fighting for Europe, because that's not our league. That's not our competition. They're just bonus points. You can't afford to get beat off teams around you, and we've only picked up draws from around the table or mid table. We've got to pick up 6 points. Norwich are on free fall. Yeah. They'll be looking at that game thinking, well, there's our chance to redeem or get the season started off. They've got to be must-win games. They've got to be 6 points, and that'll claw we're back into contention, because 6 points already, and it's early November. You didn't want that going to 10 points in December, because then even if Eddie Howe was to go on a great run and transfers were to come in January, that 10 points is 4 games to try and claw that back. That might be too much.
Yeah, I mean, well, you look at the run after those 2 games. You got Leicester, Liverpool, City, United, and Everton before the transfer window opens. So they're all very, very tough games in their own right. So we've got to be picking up points nice and early to get us out of this before the pressure becomes too much on the fans, the managers, and the players. So yeah, we're coming up to January. There's been a lot of expectation around the upcoming transfer window. There's rumours we've got all this money to spend. We'll be spending Mbappe, Haaland, they'll all be coming in, which obviously we all know is nonsense. But some fans have voiced their concerns. Eddie Howe, they say, yeah, he's a good manager, but you look at his transfer record, the players he's brought in for the prices he's brought in, namely someone like Jordan Ibe or Dominic Solanke, big money players who haven't quite paid off for him. So if I quickly share my screen, we can have a look at the money that he's paid for these players and where they've ended up and how they've fared. So, I'm pressing the wrong buttons here. So if he's obviously Bournemouth man, he spent most of his money at Bournemouth. And we can see here the most expensive player, Jefferson Lerma, 25 mil, doesn't even play for the club anymore, sold, he played in the Spanish league. Then you got Nathan Ake, who, at the time probably was a smart purchase. He's fantastic form for Bournemouth. But then you look down, you go, Solanke, Ibe, both massively backfired at the time. Solanke now finding his feet in the Championship, but was bought as a Premier League striker and didn't quite do the business for him. Danjuma was quite a promising signing, but then was sold straight away, to the Spanish league. That's not his fault. He wasn't in charge when that happened. But there is the other side of the coin, isn't it, Carl? Because you've got players like Tyrone Mings that he signed here for 10 mil, sold him on for a profit. David Brooks, only 10 mil, fantastic little player for them. And then, obviously, Callum Wilson goes without saying what a fantastic signing he's been, with 3 million back in the day from Coventry in League One. And, Harry Wilson on loan, Jack Wilshere. Although, these players have their own problems, they are good players and will be good. They're good investments at the end of the day to help you out of, say, a relegation scrap. Are you worried about January, about where that money's going to be spent because of the limited resources he's had at his disposal at a club like Bournemouth? Are you worried that he's not going to invest the amounts of cash in the right places that he has available to him now that he's got such almost a war chest available to him at Newcastle?
No, I personally, we've had managers in the past who've made fantastic signings, especially in terms of value. Sissoko, for example, in terms of what the value was to us. But then we've had the complete opposite with the likes of fucking Cisco, for example. It swings and roundabouts with any manager. I think the difficulty that Eddie Howe would have had is, like you said, there were financial restraints. So there's a little bit more pressure on him to go out and get the right players for that money. I don't think there's going to be any financial pressure here. So it can kind of, as bad as it sounds, afford to get it wrong a little bit, if that makes sense, and probably have less flack than what he would at Bournemouth, for example, because it's not really going to have much of a financial impact on the club. Obviously, they wouldn't be over the moon with it, but I think there'll be less pressure. So yeah, I'm not worried in the slightest. I'm actually quite excited to see what he can do with unlimited resources effectively.
Do you expect? Welcome to the show as well, Johnny. Mr. Johnny Greenwood joining us here. What are your initial thoughts on this then, Johnny? If it is to go through as expected,
look, we need an appointment. As simple as that. It's been far too long. It seems like a lifetime ago almost that Steve Bruce was in charge of Newcastle. That Spurs game seems like a long time ago. He was not my first choice. He certainly wasn't my first choice. I think the question is, because when we were talking about Unai Emery and Carl and Sam on yesterday, if that was announced and that went through, I would have felt, yeah, we're definitely going to stay up. I still have a gut feeling that this is very much borderline whether Newcastle United are still a Premier League club at the end of May with Eddie Howe in charge. Mm-hmm. I feel that, yes, he's a good manager and yes, he's an upgrade, but how good is he? That's what we've got to see. 6 points off the bottom three with a squad that needs investment, and he's got about 8 to 10 weeks without that. To be honest with you, I would like to see him in the dugout on Saturday. Even if he's just been confirmed, say he gets confirmed tomorrow at some point, which where we all kind of think will happen. Be on the touchline on Saturday, even if you haven't really spent much time with the team. Be on the touchline, barking out instructions and getting your point across as early as possible. And if he puts Ryan Fraser on the wing, that would be even better. That would be better. That would make my week.
He's better than the last two managers combined, yeah. So you mentioned you're a little bit worried where you're not as secure as you would be if someone like Unai Emery would be to come in. Why do you think that's down to just the manager then? Do you believe the squad at its current state would be good enough to keep us up under a manager like Emery? Or is it that, a manager like Emery would have better targets in January to bring something in? Or is it just purely down to managerial style?
It's a bit of both, Matt. It's a bit of both. If Emery came in January, you're having a conversation about coming to Newcastle, I think Emery can get you over the line. Can Eddie Howe do that? I'm not as convinced. In terms of the actual manager and tactics and how they set up a team and how they go about things, look, Eddie Howe's probably better on the eye in terms of how he wants to play. You never really watched Bournemouth and were bored of watching Bournemouth, were you? Whether they won, they drew, or lost, you were always entertained. Now that's a good start. With Emery, he probably would have been quite defensive to start with, but as soon as he gets better players in, it would have probably worked. It's just such a big risk. It's such a big risk, and he'll be wanting control of who he wants to bring in as well. So if he's been given that assurances as well in January to work with a director of football to bring in his sort of players, it's got to work because we can't be relegated at the end of the season. And that's my only doubt. It really is, because January's so huge. We've had so many Newcastle fans talk about the significance of this January transfer window. It is huge. It is really, really significant. So we need to be in a position that if even we're still in the bottom three, but we're in the bottom three by, say, 3 or 4 points max, basically where we are now, by the 1st of January, that's not necessarily a bad job considering the state the hand he's been dealt with to start.
No. Carl, just before Johnny came in there, we were mentioning transfers, and we obviously nicely left it there on the January transfer window. Are you with Eddie Howe and looking at the signings he's made in the past, and you said you were confident going into the January transfer window? Are you expecting him to spend a little bit like Rafa did, a little bit here on a quality player, not overspending too much on that player? Or are you expecting, now that we've got a bigger budget available, that we'll go and get like one quality player, maybe a James Ward-Prowse, as well as a couple of little signings? Or will it just be about reinforcing the squad depth as a whole to get us out of this season, and then we can rebuild in the summer?
I think it will be the latter, personally. But I do think if there's an opportunity to go out and get a marquee signing, then I think he'll do that. And I think, like many people have said in the comments, and we've said, there does have to be a director of football put in place. Appreciate that, Eddie Howe will want as much control over the transfers as he possibly can. But I think getting a director of football in is just going to ensure that the money is spent wisely. So, yeah, I think doing whatever's necessary to maintain Premier League status and then kind of moving on from there. But there are lots of quality players coming up. I think Jesse Lingard is a legitimate option. I really do. James Ward-Prowse, obviously. People talking about Connor Cody, things like that. These are players that we can actually look at and go out and spend the money on if we really want to ensure the Premier League status. So I'm excited. Like Johnny said, I 100%. If Emery was there, I'm like, yeah, we're staying in the Premier League, and there is a little bit of skepticism, but I'm still excited because we're now in the final stages of it being a complete new regime. So I'm ready to back him. To be honest,
I think that's the attitude that we've all got to have going into this. Earlier, we mentioned the transfers that maybe hadn't gone so well, but Eddie Howe is also known for uncovering these hidden gems as well. We touched on Callum Wilson, David Brooks, and Harry Wilson as well. But these are some of the lads that he's brought in for next to nothing. Some of the names you'll recognise. Obviously, we've got Harry Arter, who is a stalwart in that central midfield for Bournemouth, got all the way up the Leeds, £126,000. 2 players that are currently at Newcastle, Matt Ritchie and Fraser, combined 800, nearly 900 grand to sign the pair of them, and they've been fantastic players ever since he signed them. Ritchie just about starting to drop off, and Fraser being played out of position constantly. But like these Danny Ings, 1 million. Aaron Ramsdale, 846,000. He's clearly got an eye for a fantastic little player. And hopefully, if he's the scouting network that he's used at these clubs that he's been at, or the scouts and the coaching staff can help him identify targets going forwards. Johnny, you weren't on the stream earlier when we touched on the coaching staff, but it seems Eddie Howe is confident on bringing his own staff to the club as well. That's a positive move by the club, isn't it? Rather than just sticking with what we've got.
I think that was always going to be the case regardless. We have Steve Agnew, Stephen Clements were never going to be with the next managerial team regardless, in my personal opinion. There's always been that question with Graham Jones, but fine, Graham Jones wasn't with the Steve Bruce regime in terms of the Stephen Clements and Stephen Agnew. So they'll probably be gone in the next 24 to 48 hours. I would imagine they'll probably be gone after the Brighton game regardless, just because they've probably been doing most of the tactics this week. So I think that's just the sign of a club that actually does the right things, you know, in terms of if they're getting in a manager, they need to bring in people that they want to bring in. Jason Tyndall, the obvious one. He's been Eddie Howe's right-hand man for a number of years. I was surprised maybe even Jonathan Woodgate wasn't given a mention, because obviously around about that time he was at Bournemouth and obviously he knows the area well, knows what Newcastle's all about. I wouldn't be surprised if we might see him in the capacity if he decides to ask that question to him. So that is important. I do take that. I just like looking at the players there as well. It's the same with any manager. You know, Rafa brought in some good players, brought in some bad players. Sir Alex Ferguson brought in some good players, brought in some bad players. Every manager's going to bring in good and bad players. Eddie Howe has to bring in 85, 90% have got to be good players in January. They've got to be, because if we don't do it right, we will be relegated. It's as simple as that. Because the league now, you've got Leeds who are 17th, and Leeds are miles better than us at the minute. They do. Let's be honest. So it's interesting. He's got to make sure that when we're going for the players like Carl mentions, like a Conor Cody or Jesse Lingard, for example, he can actually attract them. Yes, the money's a big factor, but can you play for me? Can I get the best out of you? Can you improve me as well? That'd be fascinating to see what happens.
Yeah. It's that man management, isn't it? You know, it's not just bringing in good players; it's making the players that you currently have play to the best of their abilities, just extracting the best out of them, like Rafa did with the likes of Longstaff and examples like that. You know, it's funny you mentioned Leeds. You know, Leeds, he said they look miles better than us, but they only just beat Norwich the other day, and we've got Norwich and Burnley coming up. We've got to be worried at the moment, you know. Looking at that squad, then, what do you think changes, Carl? You know, Eddie Howe's going to come in. He's clearly going to come in and bring in his own tactics, his own way of managing. Do you see much changing straight away? You know, whole revamp of the starting 11, or is it going to be a gradual transition?
I honestly think for me, it's really dependent on what he sees when he gets into training and what he feels that how he can implement his tactics. But, you know, from the outside, as someone that doesn't have any of those qualifications, I'm like, get rid of 80% of them, to be honest. But I don't know. I'm again, like Johnny said, I'm very intrigued to see what he can do with this group of players, because we've all said plenty of times that we believe that this bunch of lads are more than capable of Premier League status, and definitely more than capable of, you know, being in a relegation scrap. And I think, again, without trying to compare Rafa, but he got the best out of a worse team. Yeah. So I don't see, like, with the credentials that Eddie Howe's got, why he couldn't do that. And I'd really love it to happen. You know, like Kevin Keegan said, I'd love it, because I'd just love to turn around to the media and say, fuck Steve Bruce. This is what we're talking about. Like, there's potential in this squad. And the reason that we didn't succeed is because of the management and the backroom staff, not because the Newcastle fans are on his back.
Yeah. I mean, that it would be brilliant, wouldn't it? Just a massive middle finger to the rest of the world. Just stick it up here where the sun don't shine. But yeah, you're absolutely. We've got polar opposite ends of the scale, haven't we? We've got Steve Bruce on one hand, your traditional old-fashioned manager, you know, 4-4-2, or what we used to be 4-4-2. Lump it up, hope Saint-Maximin gets on the end of it, hope he creates something out of nothing. Then in comes, you know, a young manager. You're tactically fantastic. He's got new ideas, you know, a bit like Graham Potter. Well, he was Graham Potter before Graham Potter was Graham Potter, was he? So there's got to be excitement among the fan base, because I'm still seeing a lot of negativity, Johnny. And it's all kind of centering around that, he got relegated in his last season. But it's not about that, is it? It's about what's come before that.
Look, that obviously is a part of his managerial career. We can't ignore the fact that he was the manager when Brighton, when Bournemouth got relegated. But that is something that he would have learned off. I think it's a good thing that he hasn't had another job in the 18 months that he hasn't been the manager. he could look back and go, right, what did I do right? What did I do wrong? Why was I in a position that I was in the bottom 3? Did I not buy well? Did I buy well? Tactically, how did I improve players? Did I improve them brilliantly? What was I like in game? That's the sort of questions he'd be asking himself. And the good thing is as well, by the sound of it, and hearing from Keith Downey early on Sky, even the old regime were having conversations with his representatives. So he probably has watched a lot of Newcastle in the last few months and gone, right, if I was manager, what would I do? And I think one of the things I would like to mention as well, players like Jamal Lewis, or let's just say the defence, needs to be coached a lot better.
Yeah.
You look at the midfield, we're lacking so much creativity. We have got a couple of creative players, especially going further forward. And the fact that he knows the likes of your Ryan Frasers, your Callum Wilsons in particular, how can he get the best out of them with an Alan Saint-Maximin, who is our star player, along with Callum Wilson, you would argue. That's how he has to look at it, and how can we get the best out of them? One player I think that could really flourish with an Eddie Howe in charge is Miguel Almiron. 100%. I really do. I think you could find a very, very good little position for him. Dare I say a number 8, considering we'll be talking about Ryan Fraser as a number 8 under Steve Bruce and Graham Jones as well. But I think he can actually get a lot out of Miguel Almiron. I think, especially with the way that Bournemouth like to play in those little pockets of spaces, especially going further forward as an 8, as a CAM, that is something that Miguel Almiron has got to really think right. He knows how to get the best out of these sort of players. But I just hope that it's entertaining football, but ultimately it's results as well. He's got 2.5 years. I think that's fair enough. I think that's a safe contract.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned, he's going to come in with a coach for players. I think, Carl, the thing that's been missing at Newcastle for so long under Steve Bruce is an identity. It's how you want to play football. We did, I know we keep going back to Rafa, but we had one under Rafa. You look at teams like Liverpool, they've changed the way they play under Klopp and they've had massive success for it. Graham Potter at Brighton, it's taken him a couple of years, but he's built the way they want to play. He's got the players he wants to coach into that system. Eddie Howe is going to bring that to Newcastle. And it might take a while to click, but it will click eventually. And we've been missing that for so long. It's got to be an improvement, hasn't it?
Definitely. And, again, going back to Steve Bruce, it didn't work out for him. And that is exactly why, because we didn't have an identity and we never found one. For whatever reason that was, we just didn't find one, whether he was capable of doing it or the backroom staff, we just didn't find one. And this is the start of getting rid of all that and implementing at least an identity and then moving on from there. So it's that alone will benefit us tenfold. And I'm excited to see, if even for better or worse, how it does affect us.
Yeah. Like you say, for better or for worse, it could completely backfire and we concede 10 every game. Johnny, we were talking a little bit before we came on, looking forward at our fixtures up until the January transfer window. We've got a couple of quote unquote easy games. We've got Brentford coming up after Brighton, who are very hit and miss. They ship a lot of goals, but they also score a lot of goals. Followed by Arsenal, Norwich, and Burnley. Now, moving Arsenal out of the way, Norwich and Burnley, 6 points got to be, hasn't it? Absolutely has to be, regardless of the systems in place or not. Has to be taking 6 points.
I feel like we say this every season. There's always like 2 home games back to back, and you go, actually, we should be getting 6 points, or we need 6 points out of this. I know December is absolutely horrific. I know it is. But I don't think we'll lose every game in December, because when you look at Premier League seasons gone by, you normally pick up a point where you don't expect to. Yeah. I'm not saying we're going to pick up a point at Anfield or the Etihad or against Man United, but we might, because that's just how the league is. And everyone's playing so many games. You are going to pick up points where you don't expect to. All I would like to see is a bit of consistency and a plan. You talked about an identity before. This is our game plan. We know what we're going to do. We have severely lacked that for a long, long time. We really have, especially under the Steve Bruce era. He tried Rafa's tactics, and then he went to something else, and then he went to something else. Then he brought Graham Jones in. Then he's gone back because he wanted to do it his own way. You get me drift. Let's get an identity. Let's get an idea of what we're going to do. And I think we can pick up points. The away games that we've got are tough until Christmas. They are tough. but there are some winnable games. And as you said, Burnley, Norwich are huge. Norwich at home, that's got to be 3 points. Burnley, it's Burnley. You don't know. Burnley's a tough one for Newcastle. We don't lose to Burnley at home, but we don't win many games. It's normally a draw. It's normally a 0-0 last on match of the day. We just need to make sure it's a 1-0 scrappy 85th minute winner from Callum Wilson because he's got it in his locker. That's how we've got to look at it, and then we'll see where we are. But if we're out of the bottom 3 by January, that would be fantastic. Absolutely fantastic.
Yeah.
I still think it'll be difficult because of the run of games we've got.
Yeah, I mean, it would be typical Newcastle United, lose against Norwich and Burnley and then go and beat Leicester and Liverpool away from home, wouldn't it? That's how we'll do it. We'll get 6 points in those 4 games, but who knows where they're coming from. Comparing Eddie Howe and Steve Bruce, obviously Steve Bruce, manager of Newcastle for a few seasons, Eddie Howe coming in. Disappointing when he managed Burnley, but with Bournemouth is what we judge him on, really. And looking at you mentioned, Johnny, we've got to get points on the board because at the end of the day, that's what matters. It doesn't matter how you play, you've got to get points on the board. And, Steve Bruce took 97 games in charge of Newcastle, according to the transfer market anyway, average 1.15 points per game, just over a point a game. Not horrific, you'll take a point per game throughout the season, you'll stay in the Premier League. Eddie Howe with Bournemouth in the Premier League, the season he got sacked, the season he went down and then left his post afterwards, 0.89, so obviously a bad season there, but season before, 1.18. Season before 1.16, season before 1.21. These are all better than Steve Bruce. It is a step up. It's not much of a step up, but given the resources that he had, Carl, you'd expect, coming into a club like Newcastle, the expectations, the squad arguably being better than what he had at Bournemouth, plus the resources at his disposal. You'd expect we are going to pick up enough points before the end of the season to stay in the league. That's what we've got to expect, bringing in a manager at this time of the season.
Yeah, definitely. And there's been far too many occasions where we've acted too late and obviously it's not worked out. So, yeah, it's a perfect time to get him in. I'm glad that the Unai Emery stuff was dealt with pretty quickly. Obviously, unfortunately, he didn't come in, but I'm glad that they just moved straight to Eddie Howe and have essentially got that, what it looks like to have got it done. So, yes, expectation has to be to stay in the league. We have more than enough time to do that, so there won't be any excuses with regards to that. But as Johnny said, it's right to think that it's 50-50 at the end of the day. It's going to be a difficult season, but you'd like to think that we've got enough about us to be able to stay in the league.
How long? I'll put this to both of you, and I'm sure I'll get different answers from you. How long do you reckon that he's going to get given in the job under the new owners, but by the fans as well? Because if it backfires, then it could backfire horribly, and the fans could turn quite quickly. If we're still in that relegation scrappy, we could be 10 points behind by Christmas. We could be deep in that relegation zone. Johnny, I'll come to you first. How long would you personally give Eddie Howe, if results don't go his way straight away? And how long do you think the owners will give him? Given that it's not a massive contract if they need to sack him and get rid of him. How long for both of those?
Look, money's not an object, so it doesn't really matter in terms of we give him a year, 2 years, 2.5 years. But I'll answer your question anyway. The next 12 weeks are huge because if he does well, they'll trust him more. If he can really improve the team that we've got and then add your better players, then it looks really good. And I think they'll give him more time than even if there's a little bit of pressure being put on him. What do I think? I think at the 2.5 years, I think he'll do well to do the 2.5 years. Not because I don't think he's a bad management or a bad choice. I just think they might think if we do well for a year and a half, say we stay up, touch wood, and then we get into the top 10, roughly, they might think we can get a bigger name now. We could get someone to take us to the next level. I could talk about Eddie Howe all night long, Carl, couldn't I? All night long, I could talk about Eddie Howe, right? About how long he's going to be here. But I think he could be here 18 months. That's my prediction.
Do you agree with that, Carl?
Yeah, I think my worry. I will be honest, and please don't bash me too much in the comments. I think it's easy for us all to get carried away and think. I want to put this in the right word because the last thing I want to do is insult anyone. But I think we as a fan base sometimes can become a little bit entitled. And
You're
myself included in that, by the way, because there's plenty of times I've said I won't bash Steve Bruce, and then 2 days later I was on his case. So we have to be patient with him, and I understand it is going to be difficult because, like you said, there is a real chance that we could quickly turn on him if things aren't going the way that we want them to, even before the end of January, for example. So I'd like to think that he's got a good 18 months, and I think the majority of fans will back until the end of the season. But I do worry that we could turn on him pretty quickly. I do worry about that. And I would just urge people that are watching this, at least, let's just be calm and let's just see how things go. And if it's not going to plan, let's not, berate the man. Because I know we can do that pretty quickly. I think that's just football in general these days, not just Newcastle fans, of course.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely spot on with that. But yeah, it's interesting though that the change in attitudes with fans, the optimism. Obviously, Eddie Howe is arguably, well, unarguably actually, a better coach than Steve Bruce is. But
I didn't mean it that way.
But if this had been under Ashley, given appointing a new manager halfway through the season, if he doesn't get results, we want him out. We need someone that can get us results. It's interesting, the change of mentality now. It's not all 100% on the here and now. While it is, imperative that we do stay in the league, there is a long-term vision with this, Johnny, isn't it? Like, he might not be our savior at the end of the day. We may still get relegated at the end of the season, but we've got to think, where do we want to be in a couple of years' time? Is Eddie Howe still going to be there? Is there going to be someone else to take us higher up? And like I said, the priority is to stay in the league, but realistically, it's about the long-term vision, isn't it?
Look, that's what the owners came for, didn't they? They want to win the league in 10 years. No, I'm just saying that from an owner point of view. I'm not saying that from a fan point of view. I'll be amazed if we do that in the next 10 years. All I will say is that there has to be significant improvement year by year by year. But Eddie Howe is getting this job at the best time. No anti-Ashley, in the sense of you're not going to get out of the club every 2 seconds. It's a fresh start now. He's coming at the perfect time. He's probably, well, without using the phrase many times, he hit the jackpot, because new owners with new investments, with 50-odd thousand backing him, that could work really well. And he hasn't got to take on Chelsea straight away. Like you said before, Matt, the run of fixtures he's got, let's take away Arsenal's side, which I think would be very difficult. But the first 6 fixtures aren't too bad. After Leicester we're okay at Leicester. We've won a couple, we've lost a couple over the years. But if we're in a position after Leicester where we've done okay and you can see improvement, I think fans will be very, very happy, because you can back them for the Man City game and the Man United game, because you've got an identity and an idea. Even though you're not expecting, definitely against Man City, Man United, depends whether they're hot or cold. But let's just see where we are. I just want to see some players improve. I want to see, can he earth a right back that can improve us defensively? Can he get Jamal Lascelles to improve? I don't think we've seen many good performances from our captain from a long, long time. I really don't. Can he get a good partnership going there at centre half? Can he get Jamal Lewis flying at left back? Because I've not seen him all season. He's played a second of Premier League football this season. There's a lot of questions. It'd be interesting to see who he doesn't fancy as well. Does he fancy a Sean Longstaff? Does he fancy a Joe Linton? Does he fancy a Dwight Gale? Like, I'm just picking out a few players there that some aren't going to play every week, but let's just see what he thinks of them and where he thinks we actually do need to improve. Yeah. But I would, again, if it does get announced tomorrow, please be in the dugout. Please be in the dugout and show that your intent is there from the start. And then you've got 2 weeks of the international break where you can really drill in the coaching and see where we're like for the Brentford game.
Yeah, I think it's the appointment's coming at about the right time, and maybe it could have come sooner, but at international break, give you time to work with the players. We won't have a lot of people going on international duty because we ain't got that quality of squad. But it gives it time to get to know the squad and identify the players that he says they might not be playing the best football right now, but I can get the best out of Miguel Almiron or Joe Willock, who's failed to hit the heights.
Willock's another one, yeah. That's a great example. Example, because Willock's been bought for big money, so he's not going to. Well, big money in terms of Mike Ashley Newcastle. So can you get the best out of him? They must be quite excited, the players, surely. They've got to be excited. I know that it's been 2 weeks and we've gone to Eddie Howe, and from the scale of it, you go, well, you could have got him in the day after you sacked Steve Bruce. But at least the owners have done a little bit of homework and kind of go, right, what's the kind of manager we want? It was Unai Emery, but we have gone with Eddie Howe because Emery said no. So it'll be interesting. But yeah, let's see what happens.
I'll tell you one player that won't be excited. John Joe bloody Shelby. It means he'll actually have to try and get in the first team rather than just dossing around with the under-23s. But he'll have to graft to get in that team. But the more and more I read about Eddie Howe and, you know, his history and his record, it's like, where on earth has he been for Newcastle? He seems to be the perfect match for the club. At least, you know, his history with Bournemouth, you know, you're looking at kind of mid-table or mid to low-table Premier League finishes, you know, getting an average kind of points total, but also decent cup runs. You know, you look at his performance with Bournemouth, and while they were in the Premier League and also in the Championship as well, they had 3 quarterfinals getting to the EFL Cup or the Carabao Cup quarterfinals, and a couple decent FA Cup runs as well. You know, we reached 2 quarterfinals under Steve Bruce, and, you know, one in the League Cup and one in the FA Cup. That's the kind of manager that we've been missing for the past few years. The question for me remains is he the right transitional manager? Because he seems to suit that old mold Newcastle, you know, keeping us in the league, you know, the occasional cup run, the chance of winning silverware. Is he the right man to take us forward? Johnny, you seem convinced. I think I'm still on the fence and I need to give it time. Carl, like, I can't make my mind up. Is he the right man for right now is what I'm struggling with.
I think so, yeah. I do. I think he's one of those managers at the moment where there's bags of potential from him. He obviously did very well over his tenure at Bournemouth. And yeah, you know, with all due respect to him, he did kind of come to a hill and wasn't able to progress from there, whether that was down to lack of finances or whatever. He didn't have anything to be able to take them to that next level. There's a potential of that with us. So he could either be the interim manager in keeping us up and keeping us stable and bringing in some players to put in the identity and start working from there. Or he could do absolute wonders and invest heavily and become an elite manager. You don't know. I think he's got the tactical nuance to be able to reach the next level. But I think he needed finances and to be able to obviously move that, because that's what we need in football. And I think there's a real potential for him to move to the next level. But I could be completely wrong. He could be at his level and he could be brought in just to stabilise us before they look at bringing in that elite coach to take us to the heights that they want from their project.
So do you reckon he could be the first English manager to win the Premier League then?
Oh, I mean,
break some record.
I would love that, by the way. I'd love Newcastle to be the club that set that record with an English manager. That would be fantastic, but probably not realistically.
Realistically, no. We mentioned Eddie Howe's kind of attacking football. You know, Johnny said you're never bored watching Bournemouth, but I think one of the worries that I have with him is, or at least looking at his record, you know, I don't disagree. I think Bournemouth were an exciting team to watch under Eddie Howe. They played some fantastic football, but they leaked goals like there was no tomorrow. They, you know, they're conceding kind of 4-5 a game, and they had decent defenders. Oh, bye, Carl.
I knew his Wi-Fi was dodgy.
Yeah, they had decent defenders. You know, they brought in Nathan Ake for big money as well. I'm just looking back at some of the seasons that they've had. Obviously, the season they get relegated is a different story. But you know, when they finished 9th in the league, which was their best finish under Eddie Howe, fantastic achievement. But they shipped 67 goals, with only 4 teams conceded more than those. And yes, he was winning games that season and finished 9th. But with our troubles at the moment, you know, our problem isn't scoring goals, it's conceding goals. A defensive manager wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. And I'm a bit worried that he's going to come in and struggle to stop that leaking ship, struggle to plug those holes that we've got at the moment.
It's a fair point, but I'm looking at that Bournemouth defence. I'm assuming it was your Nathan Ake's, your Simon Francis. It's not a bad defence considering it went up the leagues. But the thing is, you look at what we've got at the minute. Graham Jones had a perfect chance on Saturday to really kind of go for it. And if you get beat 3-0 but having to go for it, Newcastle fans would have been happy with it anyway.
Yeah.
You know, that's like, but he got beat 3-0 by basically letting Chelsea have a training session with 5 or 6 players that don't even really get into their starting 11, if we're being honest. If Lukaku was playing, it would have been 3-0 after half an hour, if we're all being honest. So I'm not necessarily worried about that stat because it was a few years ago. We need to get a settled back.
Oh, I think we've got some connection issues there with Johnny. Just as I was about to ask him to convince me that Eddie Howe is the right man for the job. If you're just joining us here on Newcastle Fans TV, don't forget to drop a like on the video if you are enjoying the stream so far, and subscribe if you haven't already. We'll try and get Johnny back as fast as possible. I think he's back in the waiting room. He seems to be there. Hello, is your connection alive?
It wasn't me connection. Someone.
Oh, it's like a robot, honestly. Unreliable. Right, we'll let him go and he'll come back and tell us why Eddie Howe is the right man for the job. Yeah, like I said, drop a like on the video if you haven't already. Subscribe to the channel and, of course, NFTV Extra as well. Fantastic content over on our sister channel. And drop a comment. Let us know what you think of Eddie Howe as the next Newcastle United manager. You know, he's coming in a year out of having a job. You know, he left Bournemouth in 2020, August 2020, I believe. And he's coming back into management. They're struggling Premier League team with Newcastle. We're leaking goals for fun, and you know, we're scoring a few, but we're still 6 points adrift at the moment. Let's quickly have a look at the Premier League table. We've mentioned the fixtures that we've got coming up in the coming weeks. We've got Brighton at the weekend, which I believe Lee and Brandon will be going to. So excited to see Brandon at a Premier League game. But I'll quickly get the Premier League table up for us to have a look at before Johnny comes back in. So this is how we stand at the moment. Second bottom. Look at that form. Like a town in Wales. DLLDL. 4 points on the board. 23 goals conceded, which is just ridiculous, if we're being honest. Only Norwich conceding more. Like I mentioned earlier in the video with the lads, Norwich and Burnley, 2 of our opponents coming up in the next few weeks. But yes, Brighton at the weekend before those easy-ish fixtures. I say that hesitantly. But 6 points on the board without Leeds and Burnley playing, obviously, would take us up out of the relegation zone. But there is a long way to go yet to win this season. 4 draws, 6 losses, only 11 scored and 23 shit. So hopefully, if and when Eddie Howe is confirmed and comes in, he can change that mentality, that losing mentality, and get the first 3 points on the board. Welcome back, Johnny. From the nether. How are you
doing? I said I'd always press do not disturb on the phone, and I didn't, and it's the only time I've had 2 phone calls in a row. And Excellent. As soon as I said that thing about call and connection, it wasn't even a connection. That's gone the day. So someone trying to ring us. That's not. It's all great.
Can't get the stuff these days. Can't get the exactly. Before you cut out, you were on making your point, but I was gonna ask you, given there's a lot of doubt, well, I say a lot, there's some doubt in the fan base floating around. If someone was to come up to you and say, Eddie Howe is absolutely not the right man to take Newcastle United forward at this moment in time, how would you convince them otherwise without him taking charge yet? Before he's taken a game in charge, what would you say to that person to convince them that he's going to be the right man to take us forward?
He's got Premier League experience. Been in the Premier League, 4 or 5 seasons. Took Bournemouth up from basically the bottom of League 2 to the Premier League. Playing exciting football with some of the players that are in our squad right now. So he knows some of our players. He can improve players by coaching players where we didn't necessarily have that beforehand. That would be basically my opening line, opening statement rather for that argument. I think everybody will look at that fact he relegated Bournemouth, which is unfair. But even I've been thinking that in the last 24 hours, he relegated Bournemouth because it is what you recently remember. But if Aston Villa didn't not have VAR working against Sheffield United, Bournemouth would have still been in the Premier League now. Let's be honest. So, look, it's minor margins. It's very, very small margins. So we'll have to give him a chance. We have to give him a chance. Don't get, like, I was gutted yesterday when Emery turned us down. I was gutted because I thought that was a fantastic coup for Newcastle. And I thought, yeah, do you know what? Yes, we've had to endure some poor performances in the last couple of weeks, but because you've waited for the right man, fair enough, fair play to you. But at least they had a plan B, and the plan B was Eddie Howe. We've got to give him a chance. We've got to, because we need to get in a manager. We can't. I think it's even one game too many. Like, I know Chelsea's a tough game, but I'd have liked a new manager for a home game, just to kind of get all the fans on side and cheering for the same manager. But the Brighton game now is going to have to be that game, and then we've got Brentford after the international break. But let's just see. Let's just see what happens. He's got to prove people wrong with his performances. That's how you've got to turn people, haven't you? Because if you don't, it could be the shortest managerial reign ever. But let's just hope not. Let's hope not.
Yeah, well, exactly. Let's hope not. Like, yeah, you mentioned that they would have still been in the Premier League had Hawkeye been working that fateful day at Aston Villa. Single point relegating and finishing the season on 34 points. So unlucky for them as well, And that was the season interrupted by COVID as well, wasn't it?
It was, yeah. And
yeah.
They beat they got some results. Like, they beat Leicester.
They beat Everton last day of the season 3-1. That you look at that game. Everton, decent squad, decent players playing for them at that moment, and at that time, Bournemouth could still stay in the league. They're playing for all 3 points. They're fighting for their lives, and they stick 3 goals past a decent Everton team. That's the kind of fight that you want for that. You look at that Everton lineup. You got Pickford, Keane, Digne, and Coleman starting. You've got Richarlison, Tom Davies, Moise Keane, who's a good player in his own right. Callum Wilson started that day for Bournemouth, of course. But yeah, winning 3-1 when it came down to brass tacks and they needed a result. They got one, and you've got to look at that game as an example of what Eddie Howe can get out of his players. You can imagine being in that dressing room before that game, him sitting down at the players and explaining exactly what he wants from each and every one of those players. Because you can guarantee that game that every one of those Bournemouth players was willing to die for that shirt. And that's exactly what we've been missing at Newcastle United. And there's that fight that's been lacking in this side. And we've got to hope, haven't we, that this new manager bounce takes an instant effect, and come January, before anyone else has come in, we've got a couple of good results to buoy the fan base and buoy the team.
100%. And the coaching is going to be important. The training session is going to be important. And I even seen something in a video. He doesn't like people sitting like on the football when there's a break between drills. Doesn't like that. So I think that's quite interesting as well. Why does he not like that? Why does he want people to stand up and just make sure you listen intently? But look, we need to, like I say, it comes back to the identity argument. We need a plan. We need a plan A. And if plan A isn't working, we're going to plan B, or do we make plan A better? But I don't mind Graham Jones still being at the football club. However, if he says to Eddie Howe, I've tried 5-2-3 or 5-3-2, I think I'm getting somewhere with it, I hope Eddie Howe has the bollocks to say, no, we're not doing that. Because it's horrendous. It's horrific. I absolutely despise this formation. That when I watched it against Chelsea and Crystal Palace in the last couple of weeks, especially Chelsea, the midfield, I can't tell you how many gaps there is in that midfield. You're asking Isaac Hayden and Sean Longstaff to do 20-odd jobs because you've got a winger playing as a number 8 who isn't going to get a lot of the ball because they're playing in Chelsea. And I felt so sorry for Ryan Fraser because he only had one little moment in the whole game, and that was 30 seconds in when he goes into the box and he has a cross, which, let's be honest, wasn't the best cross he's ever put in. So I did feel sorry for him that day, but we need to address that midfield, because that midfield area, especially the centre midfield, because it's been an issue for the club for 2-3 years, not necessarily the manager. After Soumari, who was at Leicester, after Chowdhury, who was at Leicester, they want that midfielder, they want that central midfielder in. And wonder if Eddie Howe will look at it like that. Do I need that central midfielder to really dictate the play? Be a box-to-box midfielder, or does he want to create a midfielder like a Kabay kind of player? It'd be interesting to see what he's thinking there. But look, this is a massive rebuild This job is a massive rebound. I'd argue and say this is now the hardest job in the Premier League, but with the most rewards because of what you've got behind you. So it's a challenge. I hope he just takes it on full force and that he can really get everything right, because if he does, he could go down as a legend at Newcastle. He really could.
Yeah, I think.
But he still wasn't my first choice. I don't even know why I'm saying that. He wasn't my first choice. He probably wasn't. Like I say, wasn't my first choice. Yesterday, when you had the chance of saying, if I had the choice between Unai Emery and Eddie Howe, I would have still gone with Unai Emery as of yesterday. I don't know if that was the same with you, Matt, but that's how I felt yesterday when I seen the news. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, I'd have taken Unai Emery in a heartbeat. I think he's a great manager, and he gets far too much stick for the job he did with Arsenal because his hands were tied there. But you know, like you mentioned, central midfield is like the target area, but Eddie Howe's got a good record, you know, of signing quality central midfielders. You know, Harry Arter back in the day, it was fantastic. He played I think he played in every league for Bournemouth, from League Two all the way up to the Premier League. You know, Lewis Cook signed him as I think it was it Leeds he was playing for as a kid. Signed him, and I think he's club captain now, or he was. Jack Wilshere brought him back from the dead, pretty much, you know, and he had a decent little time there. You know, spent big money on Jefferson Lerma, defensive midfielder. Philip Billing, you know, big central midfielder. He's got a good eye for a good central midfielder, and hopefully, you know, he can identify one that we're able to bring in, like a James Ward-Prowse.
Yeah, I can understand why everybody's after James Ward-Prowse, but I just don't see him leaving Southampton for Newcastle. I even as a massive Newcastle fan, and Matt is a massive Newcastle fan as well, why would you leave Southampton to go to Newcastle now? In 12 months' time, maybe there's a conversation you could argue, but I just don't see it. I really don't see it. I think James Ward-Prowse would be looking at a top 4 club, top 6 club. Because there was rumours at Aston Villa. Aston Villa only probably a tiny bit better than Southampton at the minute. Or some would argue that Southampton may be a little bit better than the way they're playing. So I can't see that one. I've seen the likes of Conor Cody. Conor Cody's loved by Wolves, and he is Wolves' main man in a sense of the defence. I would love him to leave Wolves to come to Newcastle, but again, that's going to cost a lot of money. And he's nearer 30 than he is 25. So again, are you wanting a quick fix? That's an argument there. Tarkowski makes sense. 6 months left on his contract. It would make sense. I can understand that one. Jesse Lingard, would he leave Man United permanently to come to Newcastle? He had the chance, some would say, last year to do that, and he went to West Ham. Now there's money on the table. There's a discussion, but he would be playing week in, week out at Newcastle. He knows that. So...
Yeah, I mean, you look at someone like James Ward-Prowse, you know, he's in the peak of his career. He is Mr. Southampton at the moment. You know, he's every set piece, his name's stamped on it. He's the main man for Southampton, and it would take a lot to prize him away. You know, he's on the border of the England team, which takes some doing at the moment, especially with, you know, the talents that are in that team. And in Jesse Lingard, you know, what an investment that would be, because he's just been left out of the England squad. Was it today or yesterday? Today, yeah, he's just been left out because he's not getting game time. You know, there was that when they lost against Liverpool, there was a fan heckling him from the crowd, you know, saying, "Oh, what are you doing? What are you doing?" And he's like, "I'm not on the pitch. I can't do anything." He's clearly like frustrated with the lack of game time. So why not be in for a player like that that's clearly quality? You know, we've seen he can do it at West Ham. He's even done it for Man United on the biggest stage. He scored FA Cup final, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, FA Cup final.
Yeah, so
dance.
Yeah, a big game player. But going back to Eddie Howe, and there was this comment came in from Richard earlier. I've been waiting to get round to it. It's not that long since Eddie Howe was being touted as the next England manager, and even before the England gig came around, he was given. Most people expected him to replace Arsene Wenger at Arsenal as a long-term replacement. That's how revered he is in the world of football, and how respected he is by other coaches, because they look, you know. Yes, he hasn't managed that well, you know, at different clubs, but with the one club that he has managed successfully, he's taken them from the very, very bottom to the very, very top. And he's done it on a limited budget, a limited stadium. You know, like Lee said at the start of the stream, they're a tiny, tiny club. No disrespect to Bournemouth. They've got a stadium the size of Scunthorpe's, and they were in the Premier League for 5 seasons. And you know, it doesn't happen by accident. And I think there is a certain lack of respect for Eddie Howe at the moment, from a lot of other fans, but also within the Newcastle fan base as well. I don't know if you agree with that, but I think
I do, with a minority. but you're never going to please everybody with every appointment. Look, if Kevin Keegan walked back into Newcastle tomorrow, there might be still one person that says that's the wrong decision. You know, like that's just every set of fans. All I will say is that I do get the fact there was rumours linked with him with Arsenal. There was rumours linked with him with Tottenham. But there's been a lot of jobs since he left Bournemouth, and he hasn't taken them. He hasn't been offered them. The Celtic job, he was highly linked with the Celtic job, and he had an interview. I think he turned it down actually, and he was obviously looking for a project. He probably thought he was better than the Scottish Premier League, and let's be honest, he probably is. But he didn't want to take the Celtic job on. Everton appointed Rafa. I'm sure there would have been discussions about Eddie Howe at Everton, Crystal Palace, Wolves. There's other clubs that have been looking for new managers as well. And Eddie Howe, the only job that he's really been mentioned with is Celtic and Newcastle. They're the only two, which I find bizarre if he's the next England manager after Gareth Southgate, for example. So, but that could be also a good thing, because he's got to win people over, not necessarily just Newcastle fans, but other people in general. If he does well at Newcastle after the job he's done at Bournemouth, say he improves Newcastle phenomenally, and we still go for that big name after, like a Mancini, for example, before people shoot me in the comments, he could potentially be the next England manager, because they would probably want another English person as England manager, because it's worked so well with Gareth Southgate. And you look at the other English managers in the Premier League right now, you ain't giving it Dean Smith. Do you know? So
yeah,
there's an opportunity there for him, a massive opportunity for him. But he'd be thinking exactly the same thing. Money behind me, a settled fan base, all singing from the same hymn sheet. He'd be thinking, only I can get this wrong now, if I can get to spend the money the way I want to spend it.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. You know, it's down to him. That, you know, there's no great expectation on him as of yet. You know, that I think that he'll understand that his prerogative at the moment is keep us in the Premier League for this season, and then next season do what you can. You know, we know there'll be money to spend in January. We know there'll be money to spend in the summer. It's whether we can spend that money as a Premiership club or as a Championship club, and I think that's what will be drilled home to him when he comes. If and when he comes, you know, that he'll have had a chat with the owners, and I'm sure there'll be contingencies in place for both outcomes. You know, they'll have expectations of him, and he will understand that.
But the thing is, though, if we are relegated, he'll be sacked.
Do you think? I think I'm of the opposite opinion. I think if we do get relegated, depending on how badly we get relegated, I think we'll stick by him if we go down. I
really don't. No, I don't. I think, because they're so hell-bent on a particular plan. And this plan will be, they will have a plan B, as if we do get relegated. But their plan A has to be staying in the division. And it would not surprise me if it's in that contract, if Newcastle don't stay up, they can end it there and then. They might not. They might just go, do you know what? He was unlucky. He's had championship experience. He's got us out of the division. We'll let him have a chance. But it wouldn't surprise me if that's in the contract, because that's the job. You've got to keep this club in the division. If we finish 17th, job well done, regardless of how much money he spends, because as a club, we're so far behind some of the clubs. Like, we're playing Brighton this weekend. We are miles behind Brighton. Miles. Brighton didn't have a ground 10 years ago, and they are miles ahead of us right now. They've got the manager, they've got the style of play, they've got some half-decent players, by the way, and the match Liverpool last week, and arguably should have beaten them in the second half. So that tells you even how far we are from Brighton, little old Brighton, who didn't have a ground 10 years ago. So it's a massive rebuilding job for Newcastle United. But I'd love to, if it does get announced tomorrow, I want to hear what he says in this press conference. I want to hear what he says to our media. What's he saying? How is he getting the fans on side? What's he going to do to inspire our players, inspire our fans? Because if he can get everybody working together, it'd be fantastic. It'd be fantastic. And that Brentford game would be great. I'm not going, like I say, regardless of the result against Brighton, if I can see a half-decent performance, I'll look forward to the game against Brentford. I really will, because at least we've got something to go with.
Come that Brentford game, if Eddie Howe is in charge for that should be a fantastic game of football because Brentford are relentless going forwards. And, if we see attacking, exciting football like Eddie Howe is used to, then it could be 5-5. You never know what you expect. Just having said that, it'll probably finish 0-0 now, won't it? But
not in the Ivan Toney derby. Come on, man.
He'll score a hat-trick. It's just written in the stars that he will. It's just... someone made a good point. I can't find that. Here we go. Akas. Remember, there's 28 games left. Time to panic? I think not. And I think that gets lost on me sometimes. It is a long season at the end of the day. We've sacked Bruce at a time. We've parted company with Bruce at a time where it's probably best to bring in someone new and let them have time to work with it and change things. When we brought Rafa in, he didn't have enough time to change things, to reverse the damage that was done under McLaren. With Shearer back in the day, he got us relegated. No, he didn't. The damage was already done when he came in to replace him. So there is enough time for him to come in now and change things. It's whether that he can get the best out of the squad that's already there and get the points on the board before January, and then obviously get the players in January. Because for me, January is that turning point of going from, we'll get a win against Norwich and Burnley, we'll scrape a point or two from Leicester, Liverpool, City and United, and then after January, if we get those results out the way, you got to be thinking, right, well, we're pretty much out of the relegation zone now. We start to look upwards, because while survival is obviously the priority, we want to finish as high as possible. You said if we get relegated, it's a wasted season under the new ownership. I think, yeah, I agree. But I think also if we don't finish as high as possible, if we're not getting kind of 15th, 14th, I think the owners will be a bit disappointed there as well. And we'll see come the end of the season. We could be bottom of the table. We could be 10th. We don't know how we could win the next 28 games, win the league. Not that that's happening. But you mentioned that Eddie Howe wasn't your first choice, but you are happy with the appointment. How optimistic are you feeling that we are come, say, the start of January transfer window? Because we've got very tough fixtures up until then. How optimistic are you that we'll be at least a little bit further out of the relegation fight than we are right now?
I don't think optimistic's the right word, because the fixtures aren't great, Matt. They aren't great, especially in December. And you touched about they've got 28 games left, but you look at the first 10 games, we lost to Wolves away, who weren't playing well at the time. We lost to Villa away, who aren't playing well now. We drew to Watford, who we should have battered if it wasn't for Jacob Murphy deciding to be Pele for the last second and couldn't chip a ball over a goalkeeper. Right? Arguments we could have beat Leeds at home. They would argue that they had good chances as well. Bottled it against West Ham. Bottled it against Southampton, but Southampton could have been 3-0. There's points there that we've lost out on with Steve Bruce in charge. If you have a few more points from there, Newcastle probably where everyone kind of expected it to be, regardless if Steve Bruce is manager or not, around about that 10-point mark where your Watfords are, and you're just above the bottom three. But then Eddie Howe comes in, and you've got those points, you go, yeah, he'll definitely keep us up. I'm not bothered about Unai Emery coming in. Going back to your question, I don't think Newcastle United will be out at the bottom three by January because of that run of fixtures. By the time we play Everton, if we're out the bottom three by the time we play Everton, well done. That's brilliant job, because you'd have 4 games in a row where Newcastle fans wouldn't expect us to get anything from. So if he's out the bottom three by Boxing Day, job seriously well done. And then you've got a chance, even with 2 back-to-back away games against Everton and Southampton, of possibly improving that. But I just don't see it. If we are 3 points better off now, as in 3 points off the bottom three of relegation by the 1st of January, or by the time we play Southampton, then I'll be thinking, yeah, it's a little gap, but we've got potentially a chance to really help ourselves in terms of the transfer market. And even January's not that bad. I think that's Southampton, Leeds and Watford in January.
Yeah.
Let's be honest, there's some winnable games there, especially Watford at home. Leeds away will be a great atmosphere, but if we've got a couple of new players, let's just see what happens, because Leeds are going to play a certain way. Hopefully Eddie Howe's watched a lot of Leeds as well, and hopefully they get the benefit of that and I'm sure you'd like to see Matt Newcastle get one over Leeds, wouldn't you?
Oh, I'd love it. I'd love it. I would love it. No, it would be fantastic. Yeah, it would make my life at work a lot easier. No, it's games like that though. Like the Leeds game. You know, you look at last season and we got battered off Leeds twice, and we didn't change a single thing. You know, it was we went into the game with the same mentality, the same structure, the same tactics, and the same outcome. My confidence with this appointment is Eddie Howe's going to come in. He's going to break down. You know, I wouldn't be surprised if, you know, he's sat in his living room. He's got his little TV and there's like VCRs scattered all over the living room, you know, of Leeds' last 100 games that they've played. That's the type of manager that he is, that I expect him to be. And he's going to come in and say, right, Jamal Lascelles, this is how Patrick Bamford plays. You know, he likes to play with his back to the ball, but he's going to beat you with a turn of pace because he's not as slow as he looks. But Steve Bruce doesn't do that. He never did that. He said, you know, quote, I don't do tactics. I mean, there's literal like YouTube videos of Eddie Howe explaining how he beat Chelsea 3-0 because he like did a man-for-man press. Like it's things like that, details, the finest details that will win us points. And at the end of the day, the points on the board is what matters. And I'm becoming more and more like speaking to people like you who are confident with the Eddie Howe appointment. I think I'm being more and more convinced that this is going to turn out all right for us because we, like you mentioned just a little bit earlier, that it's not going to be instantaneous. We are going to have to be patient. You know, there is a very tough run of fixtures up until January. We'll probably pick up a few points here and there, but it's not going to be winning every single game. You know, he's not the Messiah. I mean, he might be. But, you know, we've got to back him. We've got to trust him, and we can't turn on him and the players straight away. We've got to give not only him time, but the players time to adapt to his way of coaching and his system of football. It's not going to click straight away, and we need to be patient. And hopefully the majority of the fan base will be. I trust that we will be. It seems everyone in the comments seems to be a little bit on board. There's a couple of negative Nellies in the comments there. But
I think the word, Matt, the word that we're both looking at and that I can describe as appointment, it's a safe appointment.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say it's an exciting appointment. I wouldn't say it's a rubbish appointment. I think it's a safe appointment. It's a safe pair of hands who can come in, improve what we've got, and has had money in the past. I'm sure you spoke to Carl before, and you look at some of the money that he's had to spend. He's had a Dominic Solanke, but he's had a Lewis Cook. He's had a David Brooks. He's had a Jordan Ibe. So he's seen both sides of it. Mm-hmm. But I think the word we're looking at is a safe appointment. Just let's just hope he keeps us up. And that will be the definition for safe appointment if he does keep us up this season.
Yeah. Well, before you were on, we were talking about the length of the contract, 2.5 years. And I think Lee used the word sensible. It's safe, sensible, synonyms. It's exactly what we need. It's stability at the club. It's uniting the fans, the staff, the owners, all under one banner of Newcastle United. This is who we are. This is how we want to play. This is what we want to do. And I think Eddie Howe is going to be the right man to unite all of that. Hopefully, anyway. It could completely backfire, but we're staying positive here on Newcastle Fans TV. If you're happy with the appointment, drop a like on the video. If you're unhappy with the appointment, drop a like on the video regardless. Anyway, if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel and don't forget to comment down below your thoughts as well. There's plenty of healthy debate in the comments already. Yeah, we're saying lots of ups and downs. This will be a process. You mentioned Brighton earlier on, Johnny, and I think it's quite funny. Well, not funny. It's quite tragic that we're looking to Brighton as an example of what we want to follow now, the way they're run as a club. When we were in the Championship, I was like, we should be beating these. They're a tiny little club. Who the hell are Brighton? And then they've come up at a similar kind of pace to us from when we were in the Championship together. And then we, excuse me, sorry. And then we came up at a similar time, and like you said, they didn't have a ground 10 years ago, but they went for a manager, Graham Potter. They've given him time to build and implement a system that he wants to. They've backed him when he needed backing with sensible signings, and now they're one of the most exciting teams to watch in the Premier League. And they might not be the most successful. I think they haven't won in their last 6 games, but you can't tell me they haven't played badly in the last 6 games, or they haven't played well in the last 6 games even. And last season, we would look at XG, expected goals. They were top of the charts for expected goals. The amount they create is ridiculous, which makes me a bit worried for Saturday, by the way. It's a
tough game. It's a tough game. Like, the Brighton one at the time, when Graham Potter came in, Chris Hughton, former Newcastle manager, was sacked and thinking, whoa, that's a gamble, that. I wouldn't say he's nailed on to keep you up every year, but he's more or less a safe bet he is. That he can do that. But they thought, you know what? No, we're going to take a gamble. We like him. We like Potter. We're going to take him off Swansea's hands. We're going to let him rebuild this club. And it's taken a couple of years just to kind of work his way around what he wants, what he doesn't want. And now they're really getting the benefits. And now he's been linked with some very, very big jobs that now is Graham Potter because of the style of play in particular. And you talk about the XG, which I think is a really good point. It's a tough game for Newcastle. It really is. And that creativity you talk about, like your Trossards, your Lallana's, Morpay's a threat going forward. I like the fullback. I forget his name, the left back. He's got long hair. I forget his name. He was brilliant against Liverpool the other day. But they just look a really good team to watch. A really, really good team to watch. And I do fear that this weekend that Newcastle could lose quite comfortably. But I think it was Lee that put a tweet. They haven't won a game in 6 in the Premier League. Like that's just mental. They've had such a good season so far. Like, I think they've already got half the amount of points they need by Christmas. If you're looking at it from a relegation point of view, I think they're on 16 points already. That'll be fantastic. We want 16 points, but that's not going to happen for a little while anyway. But yeah, it's a tough game. But they have an identity. They have a plan. They know what they need to do if it's not working. And I think they'll look at this Newcastle game. Maybe the fans in particular will be so overconfident that they've already won the game because they know how poor Newcastle are. Hopefully, if it's like that, then Newcastle might have half a chance, and you might get that new manager bounce. But if we could nick 3 points at the weekend, what a start that would be.
That would be huge. I mean,
it would be massive.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of people in the comments asking if he'll be in charge on Saturday. As he's yet to be announced officially by the club as the new manager, it's unlikely that he'll take charge of the Saturday game. He might be at the Saturday game. We're expecting potentially that he'll be announced tomorrow before the game on Saturday, but it's highly unlikely that he'll have had time to work with the players before the game. He may be in the stands, he may be in the dugout. We don't know yet, but hopefully it will be done in time for Saturday, because you mentioned earlier on the stream, that'll be a massive lift, not only for the players, but for the fans in the stadium as well. Those faithful that are doing one hell of a journey down to the other end of the country, the longest trip in longest trip in the top 4 divisions, but I'm not quite sure that's true. But definitely the longest in the Premier League anyway. But it'll be a massive lift for the fans, that if they see Eddie Howe at the game, and they think, right, this is the man we're going to show him what, like we did with Rafa on the last day of the Premier League season, getting relegated. We want to show him what we're about. We want to inspire him to take us forward on at the next level. It's going to be brilliant if he's there on Saturday, isn't it?
Yeah, of course it is. Like I said at the top when I first came on, get him in the dugout. If it's done, like every media outlet is suggesting, and that he's going to be announced in the next, say, 24 hours, be in the dugout. Don't be afraid. Go out there and see what you can do. It's funny because you know what's going to happen. Lee Lawler with his little camera, Eddie Howe's Black and White Army. You know exactly that's going to come. And that'll be the title of his video. And you know exactly that's going to happen. And everyone will be like, oh, get in. This is going to be mint, this. Like, that's how everyone's going to feel. Look, he just needs to do the little things right. Like, if you're standing on the dugout and trying to bark out your instructions, do that. Because I know for a fact if we were putting on a big Sam, he'd be like, no, we'll give it to Graham Jones this weekend. Then I'll have 2 weeks of the international break, and then I'll start by standing on the dugout. But no, he's got to just. It would not surprise me if he was at the training ground this afternoon, or he was in some capacity. He's seen bits and bobs. It wouldn't surprise me because we can be quite secretive like that sometimes at Newcastle. But we just if it has been done, he's got a tough job, and the work starts now. It starts now, and it's a blessing in disguise. This is an international break, regardless if Newcastle win, lose, or draw, because he's got 2 weeks to look at 95% of these players. Because the only players that he's not going to have by the sound of it is Dubravka, Jamal Lewis if he's been picked for Northern Ireland, Jeff Hendrick, God help us, and Emil Kraft again, God help us. So let's just see what happens. But safe appointment, happy enough. I'll say content. Not my first choice. Prove me wrong, Eddie Howe.
Yeah, I think that's just about a perfect place to leave it. Prove us wrong. Prove us that it's not a safe appointment, that you're going to be the first English manager to win the Premier League. That's just about all we've got time for here on Newcastle Fans TV. Thanks so much to everyone for tuning in with me, Johnny, Carl, and Lee earlier on as well. Don't forget, if you haven't already, drop a like on the video. If you're happy with the appointment, drop a like. If you're not happy, drop a like. If you've enjoyed it, drop a like. If you haven't enjoyed it, drop a like. Anyway, but thanks so much to everyone for getting involved in the comments down below. It wouldn't be a show without you guys with your input. Good night to everyone across the world. Jay in Atlanta, how are the lads? Perfect way to end it on. If you haven't already, subscribe to the channel. Have we got any announcements coming up, Johnny? Anything coming up on the channel you want to shout out?
We have got agreement on the show. We've done a pre-record this morning with Thomas Concannon, if I can say my words out, for more flags. So that'll be coming out. It was going to come out tomorrow, but considering what might be happening tomorrow, it will be getting released at a later date. Unless it's a slow news day tomorrow. Got a feeling it won't be. But we'll I haven't get any words out. We will announce that at some point. It's the same G&M show tomorrow, so let's just see what happens. Let's see what happens. But hopefully it'll be announced when it's going to be. It'll go all across our social media platforms, Twitter, Facebook. You know them all by now. So yeah, we've got that to look forward to, and we've got some big guests that we want to try and get on in the future. So hopefully it'll be a big couple of weeks of the Agreement of Ownership show as well.
Fantastic stuff. Yeah, we'll have loads of stuff coming up on match day as well as the watch along and live reaction from Lee and Brandon at the stadium, making the long trip down to Brighton. So that'll be fantastic, especially if we can get 3 points on the board. Fingers crossed.
Hey, Lee, honestly, it'll take Lee such a long time. By the time he gets back, honestly, All Night Long will be the song that he needs to sing, isn't it, Matt?
Yeah, he'll be floating home. He will. But thanks so much, everyone, for tuning in. Drop a like and subscribe to the channel, NFTV Extra as well. If you haven't subscribed to that, go over there and drop a subscribe on that. Thanks so much for everyone tuning in, and we'll catch you in the next video.